News.
Herald and News, your news now.
The Herald and News.
Empowering the community.
Basin Views.
Herald and News, your news now. Klamath Falls, Oregon.
The Herald and News.
Podcast. Empowering the community and serving the Klamath Basin. This is the Herald and News Basin Views podcast. Greetings and welcome to Basin Views, a Herald and News podcast featuring interviews with local experts discussing issues important to the Klamath Basin. I'm Kurt Liedtke with the Herald and News. This week we're joined by Nathan Cherpeski, City Manager for Klamath Falls. The role of City Manager is an interesting one, perhaps not as high profile publicly as, say, a mayor or county commissioner, yet he plays a vital role in the overall operations of many different aspects of the community. Here to discuss just a few of the present issues, Nathan Cherpeski. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to get into what exactly a city manager is. Could you describe that for me, please?
Yeah, so a city manager is an appointed position. So I work for the city council, the 5 city councilors we have here. They set policy, and then it's my responsibility to implement the day-to-day operations of the city. And
how did you come about becoming a city manager?
Kind of backed into that. I was working on a master's degree in natural resources in public policy, and wasn't really interested in working in local government, but I did an internship in South Jordan, Utah. And after doing that, I thought, well, I kind of enjoyed it, and I took a position in Redding, California, and it kind of went from there.
So implementing policy, city council having the dynamic of multiple members with various opinions, you have to kind of appease everyone. It's an appointed position, so it's nonpartisan, but it doesn't mean you don't have your own opinions on stuff.
So that's essentially, they pay us for our professional opinion as a city manager. So we try to look at all the issues, present policy options to the council, and then whatever 3 of them, so a majority says to do, we do our best to implement.
Give me a basic idea on a day-to-day basis, trying to implement all of the different things that City Council wants to do. How many different agencies or departments are you dealing with?
So there are 4 direct departments and then a city attorney. And within those departments, of course, then there are numerous divisions from the police department, water, our wastewater, both the treatment and the collections, the water utility, then the support services that are inside the city that allow those other entities to provide direct services, such as finance, HR, human resources. So there's a lot going on. We also have a municipal court. We have an airport, which is unique. And so we have a lot of those different things. And then, of course, parks and recreation. So we have all our park system plus the Ella Redkey Pool.
So how many different balls are you juggling on a day-to-day basis?
Actually, quite a few. Today, I was telling staff, I haven't even had a chance to read the paper yet. Today, I've been running between meetings all day long. And so my kids asked me what I do, and I said I usually go to meetings and discuss things I would do if I weren't in the meetings. And so we spend a lot of time in the meetings. I have a lot of staff who are responsible for that day-to-day implementation, and my role is to try and keep everybody focused in a direction that the council wants us to be.
Well, and regarding meetings, you just wrapped up budget time, which is always a hectic time for any government official. $68 million budget was passed by Klamath Falls City Council on the Budget Committee. First of all, how does the whole Budget Committee function year to year?
So a budget committee is made up of an equal number of electors, citizens, and councilors. And then we make a presentation. It's a little different than, say, at the county level because we have professional staff and myself as the city manager. We do a lot of the heavy pushing and pulling on the budget at a staff level. And council gives us direction what their priorities are, and then we work through trying to balance those resources with the needs and wants of the community.
So $68 million budget for the next fiscal year. Sounds like a lot of money, but that's being pulled in a lot of different directions and being divided up into so many different things. It's maybe not as much as people may think. Anytime that you approach a budget, whether it's government or just simply a monthly home budget, there's always the must-haves, the needs, the wants, and the we'll pay it some days. So can you give me a basic summary of how this $68 million budget breaks down?
Yeah, so a lot of it, we do fund accounting. So there's certain funds that operate. So the general fund is the one that impacts most people, and that's where you pay for your law enforcement and those things. And so that fund is primarily personnel driven. Again, 60% of that budget or so is really into law enforcement. And then when you look at the other funds, like our water utilities and wastewater utilities, that's where we're seeing a lot of big expenses right now. I think this next budget has $15 million for the first part of the wastewater treatment plant, which is going to be somewhere around 40, if not a little north of $40 million.
So are there aspects of this new budget that was passed where there were large increases or large cuts that had to be made?
Certainly the wastewater treatment plant is a large expense that we wouldn't anticipate seeing every year. Last time they built it or did something this extensive was in the 50s. So that will be a large expense. We always see different pushing and pulling. We've purposefully tried to put more money towards our infrastructure over the last few years. So both water, wastewater lines in the streets, stormwater, and also the streets themselves. And so we have a significant backlog of deferred maintenance in streets. And so the council very clearly said we want to try and address this when I got here. And so we've been really pushing towards that. This next year we'll spend about $3 million on street.
Was there anything over the course of the budget discussions that simply got kicked down the road, saying, we'd like to address this, but there's just not the funds for it right now. Maybe in a year or two we'll be able to come back to it?
Yeah, some of that, again, at a staff level, sometimes people come up, well, what if we were to do this or that? And sometimes we say, yeah, we're not going to do that. Often that involves, let's hire new people to do this or that. And your personnel is your biggest expense. And so I personally really try to limit that. And we've been operating under a soft hiring freeze for about 5 years, where we really look at, do we need this position? And if we do, is it the right position? So in this last year, we actually took a position from one department, shifted it, moving it to a different department so that it can serve a much broader facet of the organization and the community.
And it's my understanding that there's a new expanded fund for road repairs, correct? Correct.
So the utilities that use the city's rights-of-way, like Pacific Power and Avista, Charter Communications, pay a fee to the city to use those rights-of-way. And in the past, we used to charge that to our own utilities, water and wastewater. Maybe 15 years or so ago, it just kind of went away, and council went ahead and reinstituted that. But those funds are specifically dedicated to capital street work. So when I say capital, it means actual street, hopefully putting asphalt down on people's streets.
So are there projects that are already being targeted or underway? I do see more construction going on, but also 'tis the season for road work, once the weather turns nice.
It is. We have somewhat of a short season. The way our budget falls, it can make it difficult because it starts July 1, but we usually need to start projects in May. So we do some juggling with those projects. We use what we call a capital improvement plan. So we try to plan 5 years out. And so those first 2 years in that plan are pretty solid. We're going to be doing work on those streets. The years 3 and 5 move around a little bit as projects come up or shift around in priority. Maybe a street that we thought was going to be in better shape is worse. We are using something called microsurfacing right now. It's new to us. It is not new in this country. It was invented actually in the 70s in Germany. They've been using it for years over in the Reno-Sparks area, so we sent some staff down there to look at it. It's allowing us to, it is a preventative maintenance covering, so it's allowing us to put on that on a lot of areas, and so a lot of people are getting that. It should extend the life of the asphalt, and so we're just exploring lots of different ways to try and get stuff down on streets to smooth it out. Some of our streets, when they were built, they didn't have the same kinds of standards, so they don't hold up as well. And then we have just some interesting soil types around here that cause unique things when you're trying to build a street where you get soft spots and they start to sink. So it is something we're focusing on. Most of the deferred maintenance is in our residential areas. So those residential streets, they don't see as much traffic, so they haven't had the same focus, and that's why we're seeing so much there.
Residential streets are one thing, but as a community that has multiple highways coming through it, what aspects of road repairs are ODOT's responsibility versus the city's responsibility?
So Crater Lake Parkway, that is an ODOT road. And of course, 97, US 97 is also ODOT. The Southside Bypass, that is an ODOT road. So some of those bigger roads, Washburn Way is ours as a city. It used to be an ODOT road as well as South 6th Street. And portions of 6th Street as you head out of the city and out of town become ODOTs as well. So our responsibility on South 6th Street kind of stops about Elmer's.
So I'm sure there's a whole laundry list of projects to be done, but if people do see a nasty pothole or some other problem, how do they go about complaining?
Well, right now they call us. We have been, one of my goals has been to make that an easy, interactive, if they have a smartphone or something where they could snap a picture and just send it to us. What we found is we don't have a good, our backbone infrastructure for our technology, our IT, isn't strong enough right now to deal with that. So we're trying to get that in place so we can do that. Right now they call our information numbers. We handle those in admin, we handle them at Public Works, and we then dispatch a crew to take care of them.
As a public figure, inevitably, whether it's your responsibility or not, people come to you. And granted, in a community the size of Klamath Falls, maybe there's some anonymity when you're not on the clock, but how often is it that someone runs into a grocery store and they're like, "Yo, Nate, when are you going to fix the pothole outside my house?"
It happens periodically. A lot of the times if it's a true pothole, I say, well, if you let us know, where's it at? And we try to do that. Again, one of the helpful things is if people do let us know. We have eight people in our streets crew, and they just frankly can't see everything, and nor all the city crews when they're out, they just may not see it. And so if they hear about it, instead of letting it fester and think, oh my gosh, they just keep leaving it, let us know and we'll get it fixed. But we don't always have a city vehicle on that street. It may be a month or 2 months before we do that.
I certainly sympathize with that, because as a reporter, sometimes there's the perception that we are psychic and all-knowing of everything that's happening everywhere at all times. And the reality is that we rely on people to tell us what's happening. I'm sure that's the same thing in City Hall too, right? It
is. It's those extra eyes and ears out there when they say, hey, this is happening. Were you aware of it? Sometimes we might be, and other times it's news to us, and we go ahead and try and do it just because, again, there's things happen quickly, and if people see a pothole or a sign is down, if they let us know, we'll take care of it right away. But it's often, you'll talk to people and they'll be mad. Well, it's been down, or that street light's been out for months. Really? Have you called it? No. So we actually are putting in some technology on the street light standpoint, so they'll report to us when they're not working. Some new software and technology we put in. So trying to help people, and then also give them the tools to help us.
Well, one of the major issues in Klamath Falls, and certainly since I moved here, it was my first problem when I came here, was trying to find a place to live. Housing in the city, whether it's affordable housing or middle class housing, there's a shortage. There's a general shortage of options for our places for people to live in various incomes. How is the city addressing that and working with different agencies like Klamath Housing Authority and KLCAS and whatnot?
So there's actually two different things happening there. We have a quantity issue. There aren't enough. And then at least in our rental stock, we also have a quality issue. If you've been out looking for rental, you see that there are some rentals available that are just not in great shape. And so as a city, we actually ran some studies to see, well, what is our need? We have not had new multifamily housing for what we call workforce. So it's not those who are income limited to, say, like Klamath Housing Authority. We haven't built any market rate apartments since 2006. And so we have a project we've been working on trying to get those going. The biggest challenge right now is that the cost of construction is such that it really doesn't pencil to build. And if you can build a house here, you can build that same house in Bend and sell it for 3 times as much money, and your inputs into it are about the same. So the Klamath County Economic Development Association, KCEDA, has formed workforce housing group to try and talk about that. I met with representatives from the U.S. Air Force recently about that. So the city's been working down some paths on some projects, doing some studies, and trying to entice and encourage some developers to take the leap.
Is it a matter of private developers or government entities or a combination thereof? And kind of what's the long-term perspective of housing? Are we seeing that it's going to get better or is it going to get worse here?
It probably all depends on your perspective whether it gets better or worse here. But the Klamath County, the Klamath Housing Authority has been building new units. And now those will be income restricted. If you make too much money, you can't be there. And so they have built new units. They have new projects going on. Where we really see the shortfall right now is in that somebody who's making between, say, $30,000 to $50,000 to $60,000 a year. That range, we don't have a whole lot of housing for them, and so that's where we've been focusing. That one really is a private investment. There are some programs we've looked at on how to do that, but really they're incentivizing a private developer to do something.
Another issue that relates to housing in a way is, it's all about location, right? One of the big issues around here has been noise levels as a result of all of the railroad operations that we have here. Now, the railroad industry in Klamath is a big deal here. We have that gigantic rail yard. Amtrak comes through, especially now that the airport no longer has a commercial airline, at least hopefully short term doesn't have an airline. Amtrak is a big deal. We have tons of transit coming through on our rail lines, but that resulted in a lot of sleepless nights for citizens in certain areas, and so a quiet zone became a big issue. Where do things stand currently in the train crossing quiet zones?
So the area we're specifically looking at is at the Portland Street crossing, which is it's near Klamath Union High School, and we have hired an engineering firm who specializes in that. We've met with the Federal Rail Administration, Union Pacific, the state of Oregon out on site, talked about it. And so we've retained an engineering firm to help us design what we hope will be a solution so that they can go to a quiet zone. Quiet zone just means they don't blow their horn unless they will blow it if somebody's trespassing across the tracks as they're coming up, cars going through or something. But that's our hope, is we build something so that you cannot do that.
One of the city's owned entities is the Ella Redkey Pool. Now, it's pretty unusual to see a community that has an outdoor swimming pool that operates year-round. Usually outdoor pools tend to be seasonal. That, of course, I'm sure creates all kinds of issues in terms of keeping it heated when we've got a foot of snow on the ground, it's minus 10 degrees out. You can still go swimming. What is it like maintaining an outdoor pool in an environment as varied and harsh as the Klamath Basin can be?
So our pool is geothermally heated. So the heating, if we were using natural gas, there's no way you would keep it open. So we've allowed it. It is expensive to keep that year-round. Most of our revenues for that pool come in during the summer when the kids are using it, and families are using it. In the winters, it tends to be those who really just like to swim. We'll have some hard discussions as we go forward, whether we keep it open for as many hours as we do, especially in those winter times. I could see where we might start to cut back on some hours during the winter time. It's important for us to support the schools, the high schools, in their swim teams, because that's where we get all of our lifeguards from. And so it's a little bit of a catch-22 for us. But yes, it is very unusual to operate a pool year-round. I don't know that any of our other cities, comparator cities that we look at, actually operate. If they operate pools, they definitely do not operate them year-round if they're outdoors.
What's the future of the pool? I know there's been some management changes, and whether or not you maintain the hours, like you said, what are we looking at in terms of short-term and long-term for the pool, the pool's future?
Right now, it's continuing to operate the way it is. We just hired a new manager. When that person is fully on board, we'll look at things. And like I said, there's always some discussion about how you go forward. We just resurfaced the pool, so the pool is in good condition. We did some remodeling work in the changing facilities there. So, in a lot of respects, it's a great amenity. We're working hard to keep open, and we'll just be continually looking at it as we go forward.
Okay. You had mentioned earlier that there's been a soft freeze on hiring in the city for a while now, but there is currently a vacancy for city attorney. So I was curious what the timeline is on that, or if you're looking at final candidates, and if there's any other city positions that are currently being sought right now.
So that is one we just started advertising on this past Tuesday. So it just went on. That will advertise for about 6 weeks, and then we'll begin a process of sorting through candidates for the city attorney's position. Other positions throughout the city, we have retirements regularly, and that any position we have open, we also those retirements are across the board, and then sometimes we lose employees to other career fields or to other cities, and so we kind of always have a churning going on in recruitment. So I think right now the ones you're mostly seeing, we've had some police positions advertised for a while. We just did some interviews on that. We've got the attorney's position. We've had some retirements in our maintenance division, which are the people who maintain the pumps and things for all the different utilities. So it just kind of always is going, and invite people to check our website out where we have those positions listed as they come up. And if they're interested, go ahead and apply.
One thing that comes into budget issues and whatnot, especially in the state of Oregon, it's been a very hot topic, is that of PERS. You were talking about retirement associated with government officials. Give me kind of a state of the union on PERS issues associated with City of Klamath Falls right now.
PERS, it would be great if it were only state of Oregon. Actually, PERS across the country, those public employment systems have problems. Oregon's is not unique, but it's also not in a great position. So as a city, we get rates every 2 years, and we have to change our rates, and they're a percentage of payroll. About 2/3 of what we have to pay is actually for people who've already retired. We are funding their liabilities, and so we anticipate next year, not this current budget, but the one that we'll have to approve next year, that our costs will go up by about $600,000 citywide for PERS. And again, 2/3 of that is for those who've already retired, mostly in the late 90s and early 2000s before they started shifting the plans around. And so those are very difficult to continue to absorb those kinds of hits. As people say, well, if you shrunk employees, which is your natural tendency to do, okay, we can't afford them, those PERS payments go up because you have a fixed amount of money you have to send them, and so they just spread it out differently across your employee base. So it's going to be a challenge for us. I think it's going to be a challenge throughout the state of Oregon, and that it is one that the city has, frankly, no ability to influence. It really is going to have to be at the state level. And in Oregon, you can't even get out of PERS once you're in it. Once you're in, you are always in. And so the city of Klamath Falls, there's no way to even exit PERS.
Well, one of the things that Klamath Falls City Council just recently passed was a collaborative effort with Blue Zones Project to make city parks and other community areas smoke and tobacco free. How is that going to be implemented? When is that taking effect?
So we just had our first reading. An ordinance requires 2 meetings to pass, so the second reading will be the first meeting in June. This applies just to the city parks and open spaces. And so it is a tobacco-free policy, and that group's been approaching the city for quite some time. They had an individual who spoke in favor of it, who talked about being addicted for 35 years and how she quit that. I think that actually played pretty powerfully with the council. And so they've introduced it. What happens after the second reading, if it's passed, it'll be 30 days, and then it will go into effect. And in that time, we'll start putting up signs. Our playgrounds right now, near the playgrounds, it's also prohibited to smoke already. And when we put those signs up, we saw a pretty drastic reduction. So we will anticipate that a lot of people will obey the signs. There'll be some that won't, but most citizens, when they see that, will actually they'll comply.
So what other issues is City Hall and City Council currently looking at or considering?
There's always a myriad. Some of them are really exciting, some are not. Some of the stuff we're looking at internally is some software to help us with fewer people be able to provide the services our citizens demand. We're also looking at our storm drains, all the infrastructure underground that most people take for granted. We spend a lot of time thinking about how do we make it work. A lot of that system was not designed. It just kind of pipes just went in the ground back in the day, and so we have a lot of issues with that we're working through. We're working on some partnerships with Sky Lakes, the University, Oregon Tech, and the county on some different things. And so there's a lot of, I think, leveraging going on and helping one another as we do that. We have this last year we're tasked to work with the base to extend our lease with the Department of Defense, and we're able to do that. So there's a lot of things that we do. Some make big splashes, others don't, but it's really trying to make sure that our citizens in the day-to-day, they don't have to worry about those things. You know, when they turn on their faucet, they have the water. When they do the things they want to do, it works. They don't worry about that. That's because that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Well, there's a lot of people behind the scenes that are making all of that happen to make the mundane be a mundane thing for people as opposed to a big concern. Of course, that comes into how people can get involved too, whether it's joining various committees or if there's volunteer opportunities. There's only so many city employees to go around to be able to handle everything. How can citizens actively be involved?
So we have several committees that the city hosts, but then there are other committees in the community, such as the Downtown Association, some of the different tourist groups, the economic development groups, and just other interested citizens who will pop in and join some of those forces. Some of them are putting on parades, some of them are focused on trying to bring business here. We work with all of them, and we try to be involved, and so if somebody's very interested in being involved, we can probably find them a group to plug in with and go to town.
Terrific. Well, Nathan Cherpeski is the Klamath Falls city manager and a professional juggler, it seems, in terms of handling all of the different things you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Thank you very much for coming in to talk to us today.
Thank you.